Well, it was the fifth all-top five matchup of the season and the third of them for Ohio State. First one ever for Indiana, and some early mistakes by the Hoosiers turned this all the Buckeyes' way as we check out the highlights from a big-time showdown in Columbus. Everything had been going right for Curt Cignetti. How would Will Howard respond? Indiana's first possession, the Hoosiers go 70 yards, 11 plays, Tyson Lawton going in. Indiana on top 7-0 AT, but Will Howard completed 14 of his first 15, including this touchdown to tie it.
Yeah, 9 straight games for him with multiple touchdowns, and it really was his arm that carried the day. This game couldn't have started any better for Indiana, and then it turned not so good because their defense became uncorked. 5 sacks today, and that was a real problem for him up front.
Yeah, and he loses the ball here to Curtis Rourke. Indiana's defense would actually have a turnover in response to that, but then it was the special teams wreck that really cost the Hoosiers.
This can't happen in big games. I mean, this is a team playing for a chance to play for the Big Ten title. You can't have that breakdown. And if the punter makes that mistake, he's got to get it out of the end zone. He should have taken a safety rather than giving Ohio State a chance to punch it in right here before halftime.
Especially, yes, in the final minute of the first half. And then, BJ, you know this guy, Caleb Downs on the punt return. Bye.
Everyone needs to fan out. Make sure you are in your lane. They did not do that there. Caleb Downs left everyone in his wake, and here comes that defense again. Jim Knowles' bunch, AT said it, 5 sacks, 8 TFLs in this ball game, shut down everything Indiana wanted to do, 151 total yards of offense.
Add that to the 4 sacks they gave up a week ago against Michigan, and you've got a problem. You've got a problem that has to get fixed, especially if you get a chance to be in the playoff.
And that was one of the things I thought about this Indiana team that really was impressive, was how well their unit played together, how physical they were, how physically disciplined and fundamentally sound they were. And it just didn't show up today in the pass game. They were confused early. Hats off to Jim Knowles and what he was dialing up. Very different defensive unit this year for Ohio State. They're having to dial up blitzes to manufacture pressure versus winning one-on-ones up front. But Indiana ran the ball effectively, but they just got behind so quickly as the game wore on. They had to get away from it, and Ohio State did Ohio State things.
They couldn't hold up against all that pressure. Hats off to that offensive line for Ohio State. Once again, going into the Penn State game, heading into this game, attrition on the offensive line is all we were talking about. Look at IU, they're physical in that space, yet they could not own the day, especially on the defensive side, against Ohio State because of Will Howard. They weren't running the rock either, but they were able to hit those corner route after corner route, and keep Will Howard upright.
I think after they took the initial punch, going down 7-0, and then finding a way to take that lead into halftime, it looked like Ohio State all of a sudden became Ohio State.
Yeah.
You know, they have been trying to be this elite program all season long, and for much of it looking very much the part. But in these kind of contests, they had an opportunity now to punch somebody in the mouth, and they did it. And I think it makes them even more dangerous going forward.
Let's get into Indiana in a second, but Ohio State, to your point, right? Close loss with Oregon. Maybe a close win that shouldn't have been so close with Nebraska, but they had one with Penn State. This becomes a blowout. Do you almost feel like now, if they beat Michigan and go to the Big Ten championship game, they are in a win-win situation because they're either going to get the bye by being a top 4 Big Ten champion or not fall out of the top 8, and so they would get a home game to start the playoff.
This win today certainly helps. It helps on paper with the eye test, but it also helps them internally and them feeling good about themselves.
That's the point.
About what it is they can do. Now, don't get it twisted. Ohio State had 316 yards of total offense today. They struggled to run the football effectively again. They did have some success early, but they're finding ways to win, and you got to say something about that at this point in the year. BJ, you hit the nail on the head, and shout out to you for making the point about the O-line. Justin Fry and that offensive line coach and those dudes in that room, unbelievable yeoman's effort with all those moving pieces to still be able to function and manufacture offense. It's excruciatingly difficult to do what they did against a good front seven. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective.
It was good they had last year's center to replace this year's center.
Yeah, no doubt. He had some experience in these big ball games. And Coach is exactly right. We went out and we played Ohio State football. We dominated this upstart who is not ready for prime time just yet. Back-to-back ball games where the offense has done doodly squat. It was the special teams and the defense that won that Michigan ball game. Another week where the offense doesn't do what they need to do to help this football team, left their defense out there all afternoon long. But now the question is, how do they pick up the pieces and move forward? How far do they fall in the rankings? Are they still in the playoff
That was my
mix?
next question to you guys.
They benefit from that Ole Miss loss because they're going to fall. Question is, would they fall out? The fact that Ole Miss lost, I think they fall.
But they
They're
don't
gonna be
pass the eye
inside
test
that
for a lot of folks, and all the doubters and the haters who were saying they're not ready for big time. Now they have a lot of ammunition in which to throw at Indiana. Said they lost by 2-3 touchdowns today. How are they passing the eye test? Why are they still in the top 10 or in the playoffs?
Which made it curious at game's end that Travion Henderson goes down on the one with a score 31-15. Your alma mater lost 30-15 against Georgia.
Keep reminding me of that.
And that score would have been very, very similar, except then they decided to punch it in. It was, I mean,
Ryan Day said he wanted to.
Tony Petitti didn't get on anybody's headset and say, hey, score here.
No.
I guarantee.
No. Ryan Day said he wanted to leave, no doubt. But do you think they fall down to where they are now on the outside looking in?
I think they may just be on the outside looking in, but to our point, I think they should be just on the inside.
That's where I
looking
think
in,
they're going to be.
Because this is a good physical football team. Keep in mind now, 14 of those points were set up by their punt team.
Mm-hmm.
They gave up a freebie on a return, and they gave up a freebie on the short field with the muff
Which
punt.
is also why the Buckeyes didn't have as many total yards.
Well, it is, but the field position. Ohio State, their
Crazy.
average starting field position was at the minus 44.
Yeah.
They're at the 44-yard line, basically playing on half of a field. Indiana was the opposite. They started on the 24.
And they
But
had
we
one of the
can't
best in the
sit
country
here.
all season.
We sat here and we talked about Miami. We discussed how week in, week out, they had close encounters, right? And they were going to slide the minute they lost. 2 weeks in a row, we've had close. Well, this one wasn't close, but, you know, they get by barely Michigan, does IU. Then they lose badly to Ohio State. That has to count for something. Yeah, they're still a good football team, but are they good enough
Here's the
to
thing.
be in the postseason
The
tournament?
argument was that you got this like quartet of two-loss SEC teams. So do you keep them as a unit because they've all beaten each other, and now Ole Miss has 3 losses, I realize. Indiana was above them, according to the CFP. Some folks said, well, actually, they belong below that group. Now, do they go even further down in that mind? Or
I think they're right there in the mix. With
Okay.
them. I would say they're right there in the mix.
And that's why I say they benefit as much as Tennessee benefits from the Ole Miss loss, because I think they're still going to be in that cup of tea. And by the way, their game, they no longer have to worry about the Big Ten championship game. Their game with Purdue,
yeah.
they get a chance, much like Tennessee. Now, this is not to say that Purdue is UTEP, but the bottom line is it's a winnable game, one that is they're going to be expected to win, and they can watch all the other carnage around. The other thing I wanted to say, I thought Will Howard took a giant step today in the minds of everybody who roots for Ohio State as a unbelievable
look at you.
quarterback headed into championship caliber play. Number one, they got to slay the dragon, which is Michigan. I think they're a huge favorite going in. But if he goes in and plays like this,
That's a lot of what?
with obviously talented receivers, this is a team that not only can be the Big Ten champ, they can also be the national champ.
Well, another thing you don't have to worry about is me going to church with you anymore.
Oh,
Because I'm
Church of Signetti.
now a heathen
Yes.
again.
You know
You've
what?
been working on me for over a month. Come to Sunday school.
Here's the thing
Come
about
to-
religion. You don't just because you have a bad day, you don't get to just leave the church.
You're not converting, Rick?
My religion,
No.
you do.
Just a little roof leak, right?
Listen, it was a bad day for Kurt Signetti, too.
Yeah.
It was a bad day for him. I mean, he needed to call time out there at the end of the half. Special teams let him down.
I ain't going to church with
He
you.
Yeah,
could be
boy,
better.
you need to exercise those
All right.
demons, what you need.
Good talk, gentlemen. We'll do it again next time.
I'm going back to heathen status.